A lot of businesses running Facebook ads right now just cannot get good results with the standard way of doing things. A direct-to-offer campaign where you directly sell your products and services to your prospects just isn't going to cut it for certain businesses. They need a different Facebook ad strategy. And we worked this out many years ago because we spent literally more than $200 million on Meta ads, working in just about every industry you can think of. And from an enormous amount of testing, we developed my Omnipresent content strategy, which works brilliantly for certain types of businesses. I've talked about it before in other videos, but a lot has changed and new features mean that our Omnipresent content campaigns today look quite different from what they used to. So if you're using the Omnipresent content strategy or you would like to in the future, make sure you watch this whole video so that you properly understand it and use it the right way. Let's get into it. So to demonstrate this, I'm in an example Facebook ad account and I'm in Ads Manager. And the first thing we need to do is go ahead and click on this green plus create button, which will bring up the campaign creation window. Now, the first thing we need to decide is which campaign objective to use. Now, with Omnipresent content campaigns, we always used to use awareness, and we still do use awareness, but we now can also use engagement. We have the option, and that's because the frequency cap option was added to engagement relatively recently, and that is a requirement for the Omnipresent content strategy to work properly as frequency caps. More on that later on. That'll make more sense as we go through. Now, the deciding factor here is the size of your target market. So if you've got a relatively broad target market, I'd go with awareness. If you've got a really quite niche, let's say it's a very hobbyist type business that you've got, I would go with engagement. Again, if you operate quite locally and you have a relatively small population that could be your potential customers, I would go with engagement. The reason why is because with the awareness objective, you are likely to get more reach. Your ads will be put in front of more people. With engagement, the opposite will be true, less people, but you might have more meaningful interactions. People are actually more likely to engage with the ads. There's not really a wrong answer here, but that's sort of the trade-off, and that's how we make the decision typically, now that the frequency cap has been added to the engagement campaign objective. I'm going to go ahead and use awareness for this example and the demonstration purpose, because I think that's what most advertisers are still going to use as awareness, but just wanted to explain that you can now use engagement, and that's the reason why. And this is one of the first big potential changes when it comes to the updated version of the Omnipresent content strategy, is you can use engagement instead of awareness. Just to quickly touch on the other settings at the campaign creation stage before we get into the details. We've got buying type, the default being auction, or you've got this reservation option. When I've talked about Omnipresent content previously, people have asked me questions about using reservation, thinking, well, doesn't that lock in lower CPMs, lower cost per 1,000 impressions? I'll get more reach. Wouldn't that be a good way to go? Not a big fan of anyone using reservation who's not a really big business with a very large budget. Yes, you can reach more people for less with the reservation buying type, but that tends to come at the expense of quality interactions, quality reach, which is not something advertisers really want, particularly small or medium-sized advertisers where your money needs to go further. You're not just looking to get your ads in front of as many people as possible, as many times as possible for the foreseeable, and you have enormous marketing budgets to be able to do so. So I'd recommend sticking with auction. I can understand why people have asked the question. As we go through the strategy, by the way, if you're not familiar with this, you'll see why that is potentially a good option. But I think going with the auction, where your ads are more likely to be put in front of better quality prospects, is the way to go for advertisers, right? So once I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and click continue. Then there are a few other things that we need to make sure we get right at the campaign level. So we've already talked about campaign, we already talked about buying type and campaign objective, but if we scroll down, we'll see that advantage campaign budget, the default is usually for that to be off. Very, very important that we do leave that off for an Omnipresent content campaign. If you turn that on, it's going to mess up everything else that we do later on. So make sure that's off. A/B testing is not something you're going to want to use for an Omnipresent content campaign, so leave that off as well. And then special ad categories, you still need to declare if you fall within one of the special ad categories. If I just click on the drop down, have a quick read through. If you think any of these might apply to your business, are you advertising financial products and services, anything related to employment, housing, social issues, politics, you must select those and make sure that you declare that to Meta. That is going to affect some of the options that you have later on when it comes to the campaign creation and targeting, things like that. But if you don't select one of these and declare that your ads fall within one of these categories, and Meta finds that out later on, which they almost certainly will, then your ad account's likely to be banned and you run into all sorts of issues. Most advertisers, this won't apply. I'm not going to select it for demonstration purposes, but just wanted to quickly give a heads up that even though Omnipresent content's a little bit different and we're not being as direct with the lead or with the sale, you still need to go ahead and declare if you fall within a special ad category. Right, with that said, let's go ahead and click next and jump to the ad set level. And then we get to the ad set level. So don't worry about ad set name for now. We're going to rename this ad set along with the other ad sets that we create later on. And that is one of the core features of an omnipresent content campaign is multiple ad sets. I'll rename them later on. That'll help explain the structure and how this strategy works and why it can be so effective. So that leads us on to the next setting, which is performance goal. So because we've selected the awareness campaign objective, the default performance goal is maximize reach of ads. And you click in here, you can see there are alternative options. I'm happy with maximize reach of ads. That is what I'd like you to leave it as if you are using the awareness objective for your omnipresent content campaign. And just a quick note on performance goals, it's really this section here that determines how your campaigns are optimized. What does Meta try and get you more of is kind of another way of saying how your campaigns are optimized. Everyone thinks it's the campaign objective that really matters, but really the campaign objective just narrows down the list of potential options for the performance goal. So it does matter, but it is the performance goal. I've talked about this before, but if you have two different campaign objectives, but the performance goals are the same, those campaigns are going to function in the same way for the most part, right? So just a quick note on that. Then make sure you've got the right Facebook page or Instagram account selected. I have seen people make that mistake, so watch out for that one. Cost per result goal is optional and something we do not want to add for an omnipresent content campaign. So make sure you leave that blank. Then we get to the all-important frequency control section, okay? So what should we select here and why is this important to begin with? Well, firstly, let's quickly explain frequency. Frequency is simply the number of times someone sees an ad. So a frequency of 2 means they have had 2 ad impressions. Now this can be applied across an ad set or a campaign. It's going to take an average. Frequency of 3 meaning that people within your target audience have seen your ads 3 times within that campaign. So we can control our frequency numbers. It's one of the big reasons for using either the awareness or the engagement objectives. This is not something that's available on all the campaign objective types. And that's exactly what we want to do with an omnipresent content campaign. We need to control ad frequency really carefully, and you'll absolutely see why in a second as we go through and break out the various different ad sets, and I'll explain how it all comes together in a bit. We've got 2 different options for our frequency control. We've got target, so the average number of times you want people to see your ads, and we've got cap. The default is cap, and I'd like to leave it as cap because I want to be stricter with how many ad impressions any one individual builds up. You can see that with target, because that's an average, let's say you set a target of 2 impressions every 7 days, as is the default, we'll get to that bit in a second. That means that some people are going to see your ads far more often than 2 times, some are going to see less, but it'll average out at 2. With cap, it's saying, no, I don't want anyone to see ads within this ad set more often, in this case, than 2 times every 7 days, okay? So it's a more strict frequency control, and we need to be strict with our frequency. You'll see why later on with the omnipresent content strategy. So the default here is 2 times every 7 days, but I actually want to go ahead and change that and reduce that to 1 time every 7 days. And what that means is the ads within this ad set can only be shown to people a maximum of once every 7 days. Now, the reason why we've got 1 every 7 days is because we're going to be creating 14 different ad sets in this omnipresent content campaign, which I know sounds crazy, completely goes against like conventional Facebook and Instagram advertising wisdom. Absolutely not something I'd recommend for other campaign types, but for omnipresent content is exactly how you want to do it. I remember that's how I started this video, by talking about for certain businesses, the standard way of doing Facebook and Instagram ads just doesn't work. You need to do something different. This is certainly different, and this structure allows us to do very different things. Once we create out the 14 ad set, I'll come back and explain why the frequency control matters so much and how that factors in, and the experience we're trying to give our prospects to get them in a place to be ready to buy. It'll all come together and make sense. Value rules is not something that you want to use for an omnipresent content campaign. Really liking value rules, by the way, with other campaign types. So you can check out my video on value rules. You'll find it on my channel quite easily, but I'm going to skip over this for now. Dynamic creative is not something we want to use with omnipresent content. We want to be really specific with what our prospects see and when. More on that later on. And then we get to the budget and schedule section. Now, one of the great things about an omnipresent content campaign is that it does not require a really large budget. What we're trying to do is build a relationship with our prospects over time. Once I've demonstrated how it works, I'll explain more about that and how that works so you understand better. But just now, whilst we're at the budget and schedule section, I wanted to mention it because it's obviously relevant, okay? So whatever you set as your daily budget in this ad set, be aware that you need to times that by the number of ad sets, and that's how much you're going to be spending on a daily basis. So we're going to have 14 ad sets. If we spend £5 per day per ad set, and you do want the budget to be the same across the 14 ad sets, that's £70 per day. Now, that might be too little for some businesses, it might be far too much for some businesses. We have run many omnipresent content campaigns with as little as £1 or $1 per day per ad set, so it can be a very affordable option. But likewise, some businesses are going to want to spend, hundreds, if not thousands per day per ad set because they're operating with monster budgets. It's going to vary massively depending on your business. The default here for me, interestingly, for this type of campaign that the Meta gave me was £5. I think that if a business can afford to spend that seems like a very reasonable place to start per day, per budget. Like I said, if you can't spend that much and you spend less, absolutely fine. Just be aware that the more you spend, the more people you're going to reach, the greater the impact of this campaign is going to be. Just like any type of advertising, the more you spend, the more people you reach, the greater the impact is likely to be. We're going to leave this as daily budgets. Now, this is how I've taught omnipresent content for the longest time. There are now scenarios where we are switching to lifetime budgets, but that's in order to use a separate feature that I want to talk about later on, because that's kind of an optional extra to the omnipresent content strategy, not required. So we'll talk about that later, but I just wanted to quickly mention that for now. When it comes to a schedule, I'm not going to set an end date. I'm going to, once it's all put together and run it, I'm not going to set an end date. Omnipresent content campaigns want to run for a long time. Their value builds over time. Remember, we're building a relationship with our target audience and with our prospects. More about that later. And I'm not going to bother with a budget scheduling option either. Again, something that we are using more and more with other campaign types. Just a quick aside, spending more during certain days of the week, for example, working really well, but we're not going to do it with omnipresent content. Then we get down into the all-important targeting section. Now, this is another area where what I recommend when it comes to omnipresent content targeting has significantly changed from when I last spoke about this, okay? So if you're not familiar with the relatively new, or it's been around a while, structure for meta ads targeting, we've got audience control, so the section up here. Anything selected within this section is a hard boundary, a hard constraint. In what that means is that if you say, look, Meta, I only want to advertise to people, as is defaulted here, in the United Kingdom, then Meta won't go and put your ads in front of people in Spain or US or anywhere else. Every now and then slight mistakes are made, you see that in your analytics, but for the most part, they're going to pay attention. And there's some other options we'll run through in a second. Anything added in down here in this Advantage Plus audience section is a suggestion. It's not a hard constraint. So if you say, for example, to Meta, if I just click in, I want to advertise to people in this age range, only people over, let's say 30, Meta will pay attention to this direction that you've given them. But if they feel there are prospects that would be really good for your business under the age of 30, they will put ads in front of those people as well. These are all suggestions, and that massively changes the structure of the targeting when it comes to setting up for an omnipresent content campaign. We can change this structure, switch to original audience options, so go back to the old way of doing things where we did have hard boundaries. But in our experience, we're doing that less and less. Whilst it might sound like you have more control, whilst it might sound appealing in certain circumstances, the downsides nearly always outweigh the upsides. We're just seeing worse results. So I'm really reluctant to go ahead and do that unless you have a very, very good reason. And I don't think we do in the case of an omnipresent content campaign. So the first thing we need to decide with our targeting for this omnipresent content campaign then is our locations. Where do we want to advertise? You can see that Meta, the default, like I already said, is the United Kingdom. And what you want to select here is very simply where your prospects are. So if you're advertising a business that operates locally, that's going to be something local. So let's give an example of that, right? So let's say you're advertising in Oxford, in the UK, your business based in Oxford in the UK, a city. You could, for example, set up something like this, right? We've got Oxford plus 25 miles. The radius is adjustable. That would depend on how far either your prospects are willing to travel to come visit your location if you're a local business, or how far you're willing to travel if that's how your business works and operates on a local basis, and plumbers, electricians, for example, how far are you willing to go? That would be where you'd be looking to advertise, right? And if you operate nationally or internationally, then I could, for example, decide just to advertise to the whole of the UK. I don't want you to get more specific than you need to be. So, for example, if we can work with everyone in the UK or everyone in the US, don't go and select certain regions. Like if you can sell nationally, potentially even internationally, then go ahead and do that. If you're one of those businesses where you go, we could work with anyone in the world, you might be tempted to target everyone in the world. probably not the right way to go. You probably want to target your core markets and relatively similar countries. So we can add in multiple countries, and if we were running the Omnipresent content strategy for our own business as an ads agency, or we have clients in the UK, we have clients in the US, we actually have clients all over the world, so like 50 plus countries, I think, at this point. But our core markets are going to be like UK, US, Canada, Australia, like what you'd expect, right? Some Western European countries as well. And then some other ones, I suppose, like Dubai and places like that. But we, for example, could add in the UK and the US, Canada, others, no problem. But I wouldn't want to, for example, add in countries where the cost per 1,000 impressions is massively different. So if we were to say advertise in India, where we do have clients, it's going to be tricky putting that into this same ad set, because remember, this ad set is optimized to maximize reach, and people are much less expensive to reach in India than they are in the UK. But we know that our conversion rates are likely to be lower there. So if you are adding in multiple countries into your locations, just make sure they are similar in terms of your CPMs. And you also probably want some other similarities like language and stuff like that, right? What we don't want to do is end up with separate ad sets for different locations, because if we do that, remember, we're already looking at 14 ad sets when we're advertising to the same locations in each ad set. And that's going to be the structure here, by the way. We're going to be advertising to the same locations. All the settings at the ad set level are going to be the same across the 14 ad sets. We're really varying things at the ad level there. Again, more on that later on. And this campaign just becomes completely unmanageable if you start having multiple ad sets per location, per campaign. It becomes really tricky. If you are like, well, I'm a local business and I've got one location in Oxford, another location in Bath, another location in Bristol, okay, yes, you can have whole separate omnipresent content campaigns in that scenario if you want to. Extra work and extra effort can absolutely be worth it for certain businesses. We've certainly set things up that way. But for most people, I'd recommend starting with the one campaign, with the one location if they have to be separate, or bundling them together. And you can always look to spread things out later on. So just some information there about locations, because I think I've seen people go wrong with omnipresent content campaigns before on a location basis. We've got some other options to quickly run through. So minimum age, remember anything in here is a hard constraint. So it might be that legally you cannot advertise your product services to anyone under 21, for example, in the location you've selected, in which case you can come in and add anything from 18 up to 25. I'm going to leave that as is for the most part. We can exclude custom audiences. So I'm going to talk about custom audiences and demonstrate them in a bit, but custom audiences are warm audiences, people who have interacted with your business previously. What a lot of people do is they'll think, wow, I don't want to put ads in front of people that have bought from me before or that are already in my sales funnel. I think for the most part, that is not a good idea, because as a percentage of your total ad spend, putting ads in front of previous customers is normally very small. And you absolutely want to put ads in front of them so that they come back and buy again. Even if you sell something that's a one-time product or a one-time like purchase, and then they're not likely to be interested for a very long time, if ever, I still think for the very small percentage of your advertising budget that's dedicated towards putting ads in front of those people, it's a great reminder. They're much more likely to recommend it to friends, family if it pops up again. So you can look to exclude these custom audiences, and it does become important if you have an enormous business where you have massive market share and you really are just wasting money at that point. But for the vast majority of businesses, particularly smaller ones, I don't think it's worth adding in any exclusions, because that's what these are, right? This part is excluding. So we'd be saying, I don't want my ads put in front of these people. I'm very happy to have warm audiences in there, as we will see in a second. And we can also be more specific about language. Doesn't apply to most businesses, but if you're advertising somewhere where there are multiple languages spoken and you're only able to serve people in the one or predominantly that speak the one language, then you can go ahead and be more specific. Okay, then we get down to the Advantage Plus audience section. So remember, here is where we are operating with suggestions. Now, what we used to say was add in warm audiences. That's who we want to advertise an omnipresent content campaign to. Or if you don't have a large enough warm audiences, go with cold audiences, okay? And that was always a little bit tricky, because given the nature of an omnipresent content campaign, putting lots of different ads in front of people over time to build a relationship, like the whole game here is warming people up to the point where we can get them to buy from us. Again, I'll talk about that more in a second. But if they're cold audiences to start with, much, much more difficult. With the new development in how meta ads targeting is done, where it's a suggestion and you can have an ad set that targets a hybrid, targets a blend of the two according to the size of your warm audiences, perfect. That is the perfect option for omnipresent content, and we can have the best of both worlds. So to do that, we need to have our custom audiences created and then add them into this existing audience section. So what I'm going to do now is jump into audiences and show you how to create the custom audiences that we need to create in order to add them in here so that we can set up our targeting the right way, a really important step of the Omnipresent content campaign creation process. Before I do that, I want to very quickly let you know about our Meta Ads mentorship program, which gives you all the support you need to get the best possible result from your Facebook and Instagram ad campaigns. And included in my mentorship program is a bunch of really cool stuff like exclusive educational material, including advanced stuff on the Omnipresent content strategy. We've got unlimited one-to-one support, so you can literally ask us any questions that you've got, ad account audits, review this creative, is this strategy right for my business? Do you think this offer's very good? What do you think about this offer, this headline? Anything you can think of when it comes to your meta ads or your marketing or even your business more generally, and we'll get back to you and give you our best advice on that. Multiple daily live calls and Q&As with me and my expert team members, so you can jump on a Zoom call with us and be like, can you take a look at this? I need help with tracking, or I need help with this, or what do you think of this? And like I said, all the support you could need to get the best possible results, more support than I've heard from any other program when it comes to Facebook and Instagram ads. If that sounds interesting, there is a link in the description. You can click on that, come through to a page on our website. You'll be able to book a free call with one of my team members to find out more. You'll also find tons of case studies and testimonials and people who've had massive success going through my mentorship program. We've had all sorts of businesses go through it, from people who run agencies, people who are selling their own products and services, people who work as marketing professionals within larger organizations. So yeah, go ahead and book a call if that sounds interesting, and hopefully we get to work together directly very soon. So let's go ahead and jump into the audiences section where we can create these custom audiences, these warm audiences that we want to target as part of our Omnipresent content campaign. So we go ahead and click on here in all tools, and then we want to select audiences. I've actually got it over here in the shortcuts as well. You may too. But audiences is what you are looking for. Now this is an example ad account, so I've got a bunch of stuff I've demonstrated in previous videos created in here. You may or may not have stuff in here depending on if you've created them in the past. What we need to do here is we need to create custom audience, which basically lets Meta know these are our warm audiences. These are people that have interacted with us previously. This is the people we want to target with our Omnipresent content campaign, and that we also want you to use to extrapolate to find other people. We'll get to that when we put it into the ad set. So I'm going to go ahead and click create audience and then custom audience. Now there's two main categories when it comes to custom audience creation. There's your sources and there's meta sources. Meta sources being engagement that's taken place within the Meta platform. So things like stuff on Instagram, stuff on Facebook, etc. Your sources are things that have occurred externally. So we're going to run through the most important options. You may want to create other ones depending on your specific type of business, but the most important ones that basically every advertiser wants to create and use and set up. So we can go ahead and click on website to start with. We'll start with the your sources and click on next. Now, in order for you to be able to create a custom audience out of people that have visited your website, you need to make sure that you've got the Meta Pixel installed on your website and set up properly. I have a video on that. You can go ahead and hunt that down on my channel and give that a watch in case you haven't set that up, but that is a step you need to take. And that is a step you absolutely want to take if you are running any form of Facebook and Instagram advertising. You need to be able to see what people are doing on your website, right? Okay, so we've got to make sure we've got the right data source. So example ad accounts pixel, which is exactly right. All website visitors is the event that we want. You can get more specific and go with people who have visited specific web pages, people who have spent a certain amount of time on our website, but for the purposes of Omnipresent content, we want the largest audience possible. Anyone that's visited our website, we are happy with, so we can go with all website visitors. Now, the audience retention default is 30, but if I hover over here, we can see that the maximum time is 180. And for the same reason as I just mentioned previously, we want the largest possible custom audience in here of 180 days. And we want the largest possible custom audience, and 180 days is going to give us that because that's the longest amount of time into the past. What that means is that they can have visited our website within the last 6 months, roughly 180 days, and they can still be included in this custom audience. So we want to go ahead and give this a name. So we can just call this website visitors 180 and then go ahead and click create audience. Very simple to do. Don't worry about any of this stuff. We're going to factor it into the campaign later on. So that's our first custom audience created. If I go ahead and click on create audience and custom audience, the next I want to do is a customer list. Now I break down customer lists typically into two different options. You've got your actual customer list, so people who have bought from you previously, and then you've got your email list, which would be people who are subscribers, for example, have interacted with you, have their email address, but they haven't actually bought from you. And typically we would like to separate those out. You may not have them separated out. A lot of businesses don't, where they just combine them in together. But either way, you want to either get that one list or both lists uploaded, and you want Meta to have visibility over that data. So we go ahead and click on customer list, and there's a few different ways we can do this, right? So if you have your customer list, email list, etc. in MailChimp, you can just go ahead and click import from MailChimp. Click on that button, you click log into MailChimp. We don't use MailChimp, so we're not going to demonstrate that. But then once you've logged in, you just literally select the lists that you've got, any list you've got in MailChimp, and then you click import and it integrates, and Meta does that for you, and it's all fairly straightforward. I'm sure you can work that out. If you're not using MailChimp, then you're going to need to upload a file, a CSV or TXT file, and you can see some of the requirements, right? So includes at least 100 customers. They don't want us to be able to retarget just like specific individuals or very small groups, and that's why they have that minimum size requirement in there. Include at least one main identifier. An identifier is something that Meta can use to match the data in your file to an actual user. Because that's what Meta needs to be able to do. They need to be able to find someone, they need to be able to take the data and be like, aha, this person on this spreadsheet corresponds to this Facebook user, corresponds to this Instagram user. Because if Meta can do that, they can actually put ads in front of them, they can actually use the data. They need to be able to match the data you've got to users. So identifiers are going to be, you can see down here, things like email, phone number, user IDs, stuff like that, right? And then it says use the correct column formatting that matches each identifier type. So you can see that the way you would want to structure this would be you want to have columns, and the column header, for example, would be, one would be email, and then you have all the email addresses, one would be phone, corresponding phone numbers, if you've got them. Not everyone does. You're typically going to have email, but phone as well. Other options that Meta's talking about is identifiers, things like mobile advertiser ID, Facebook app user ID, page user ID. You may or may not, like most people watching this, I think, won't have this other data, and that's absolutely fine. If you do, excellent, make sure you go ahead and get it in. The more identifiers you can get in there, the more likely it is Facebook can match the people, or Meta can match the people that are in your file, your CSV or TXT file, with actual users to be able to advertise to them, which is the whole point of this strategy. We've actually got customer value. So if you're just uploading an email list and people that haven't bought from you previously, then this is not something you need to worry about. If you're uploading a customer list and you have customer values associated with each customer, so what does that mean? How much did they spend with you, right? So, you see examples here, right? So we've got column header, in this case would be value. So if you do have that information, make sure it's got column header value. And then the examples would be, they spend, 0.1, 3, 20, and that's going to be whatever currency you've got associated with your list and with your ad account in general, and who you're looking to advertise to based on your location and your customer's location and stuff like that. But you can add in customer values. Now that's really useful because certain customers are worth more to your business, and that would tell Meta, okay, these people are worth more, maybe prioritize putting ads in front of them again more so we can reactivate these higher value customers. All these custom audiences that we're creating here is data that Meta's going to use to extrapolate. So they're going to automatically create lookalike audiences. We rarely manually create lookalike audiences anymore, but the concept of a lookalike audience has remained, and that is simply make an audience for me, please, Meta, of people to advertise to that are similar to the people on this list. If you include a value column, then Meta's able to go, we're not just going to find people that are similar to people who've already bought from this business, we're going to find people that are similar to those who have spent the most money with this business previously, which is more valuable to your business. If on average someone who's over 45 spends 3 times as much as someone who's under 45, you want Meta to put your ads in front of more people that are over 45. And that allows you to do it. I'm not going to do that in this instance. I'm just going to upload an example email list, but if you have the customer value, make sure you get it in there. And we can see we've got additional identifiers and things that are probably a little bit more complicated than we need to worry about for now. So I'm going to go ahead and click next. I'm going to go ahead and you can either download a template and that'll make sure you've got the comments correctly. I've prepped one up, so I'm just going to go ahead and upload a file. So I've just loaded a file called example email list. Then we've got, does your file include a column for customer value? We've just talked about that. I'm going to go ahead with no. If you select yes, you'll then be asked to make sure you selected the right column, and it's this one to make sure Meta gets it right. Then we've got an audience label. Now this is optional, but I do think this is valuable. And this is basically letting you know who are people on this list, right? So are they qualified leads? Are they customers? Are they high value? Are they low value? And that's going to let Meta know for that extrapolation purpose that I just described. So I'm going to go in this case with qualified leads, right? So we've got a label, qualified leads, we've got the audience name being example email list, and then we can go ahead and click next. And now I've just added in some very basic data so that we can just demonstrate the process. But what we can see here is that Meta's been able to map one column, but not the other. And what I mean by map is, match to what actually is this, right? So we've got mapped here. So I've got an email column, and I've got ben@example.com. And Meta's correctly worked out that this is an email. Sometimes Meta will get this wrong. So you can go in and say like, no, that column isn't email. It's actually first name. It's actually city where they live. It's actually date of birth. And you can just go through and make sure they've got them all right. Meta assumed it got that one right, but it's worth checking, and they did. And then action needed, Meta was not able to work out this one, which was name, probably because they can't tell whether it's a first name or a last name. You've also got to do not upload in case there's any information within the file that you don't want uploaded. Obviously, there are privacy considerations and things like that. You don't necessarily need to scrub the file. You can just, as at this stage, say, don't include it in here. Ben is obviously a first name, so I can go ahead and click first name. Now Meta's mapped it. You want to do that for all your columns, and then you want to go ahead and click import and create. It's going to take Meta a little bit of time to work that out. Well, not if you've just got the one option, but if you've got others, then all good. I can go ahead and click done, and then that is created and added in. Now you want to do that if you've got multiple email lists. You can combine them all into one or keep them separate either way, but make sure you get that all done. And like I said, if you've got a separate customer list, go through that exact same process as well and make sure you get those uploaded and in there. Okay, so we've still got some other custom audiences that we want to create so that we can target them as part of our Omnipresent content campaign. So I'm going to go ahead and click on create audience and custom audience again. Now we've covered the two your source custom audiences, so website visitors and customer list / email list that apply to basically every business, and you want to go ahead and get those uploaded. If you don't have an email list or customer list at all, then obviously you don't need to do that yet, but as soon as you do, go ahead and get that uploaded and added in. There are obviously other options that will apply to some businesses, not others. So app activity could be really important. Catalog could be really important if that's how you operate your business, or if you've got significant data from offline activity, again, could be really valuable to get those uploaded. But I'm not going to run through those because they'll only apply to certain people, and you can find other information on how to go ahead and do those. What I want to do now is switch to meta sources and a few different options here, and ones that most businesses are going to want to use. Now, assuming you've used video on Facebook, Instagram as part of ad campaigns, etc., you want to go ahead and click video, and that brings up a window that looks like this. So the first thing we need to do is choose an engagement type. So how much of your video does someone need to have engaged with for them to be included in a custom audience? So I'm going to go with the option that will produce the largest custom audience, which is people who have viewed at least 3 seconds of your video, not get more specific than that. Remember, we want nice large custom audiences for our Omnipresent content campaign. The logic for going with other options, things like viewing 75% of your video or more, would be that the people in that audience are warmer. They're more keen. They're more interested in what you have to sell. But Meta knows that. So if you can create a custom audience out of people who have viewed at least 3 seconds, they're going to start with the people that have watched 95% or 75%, but still have wiggle room to include some of the ones that have watched less, but Meta thinks would be good people for your business to advertise to. And their systems are really smart at working that out. So that's, I think, a better way to go, particularly with the Meta source options, where Meta has visibility over exactly what people are doing, and they can work out who are the best prospects. So let's go with 3 seconds. Then we want to go ahead and click on select videos. And now there's a few different places that we can our video sources where the videos can have been interacted with, can have been watched. So default here is Facebook page, and obviously you want to make sure you've got the right Facebook page, but we could, for example, change to Instagram account, change to an ad campaign, etc. And then you want to go through and grab the various videos that are relevant, right? So you could be like, okay, yeah, if someone has watched a certain amount of this video, I think they'd be interested in what we're looking to advertise. Now, that might be all your videos. It might just be a select few. That's a decision you need to go through and make depending on any videos that you've used previously and what they're like. So we can go ahead and, we'll grab a couple. And I mean, literally, my account, obviously there's tons of stuff. So we could grab lots of different things. You could choose how far you go back, but just you want to make sure that you've got a whole bunch in there, and don't worry about selecting a whole load in there. Likewise, if you talk about various different things, but you're really wanting to advertise on one specific offer, you could also tailor which ones you select to be like, actually, these are the ones that will correlate. Likely people who are interested in this video are more likely to be interested in our offer. So I'm just selected a handful there. Go ahead and click confirm. Then we've got this audience retention section. Interesting, the default here is 365 days, which is the maximum. I've already talked about this in other custom audience creations. We want to go with the maximum. And then we can simply call this one video viewers 365, and then we can go ahead and click create audience. And then again, don't worry about this for now. We'll talk about that in a second. So that's our video viewers custom audience created. Let's go ahead and create a couple of others. So we've got video viewers. If you are using or have used lead forms, this is another custom audience that I create, not one that's going to apply to all businesses. It's fairly self-explanatory. I'm not going to go through it in detail. I'll just click on lead form. Then from events, go with the largest possible option, which is people who opened this form. Make sure you got the right page, add in the relevant lead form or lead forms in here. Maximum audience retention in this case is 90 days, give it a name and go ahead and create it. Like I said, I'm not going to go through that one in detail because that will only apply to certain advertisers. Another one that we want to make sure we get in basically for all advertisers is an Instagram account engagement audience. So if you go ahead and click next, then make sure you've got the right Instagram account selected as your source if you've got more than one. And then we've got events, right? So we've got a number of different options. The default here is people who engaged with this professional account. And like we said, on previous options, we want to go with the option that's going to create the largest possible custom audience, and that is this one. You can see the other options like people who started following, people who visited the profile. Those are going to be smaller options. This option here is going to include all those people and other people, so let's go with the default. Audience retention is 365, like previously. So I'm going to go ahead and call this Instagram Engagers 365, create audience. And then the last custom audience that we're going to create is exactly the same as that one, but instead of for our Instagram account, it is for our Facebook page. So again, make sure you've got the right page selected, events, various options, but we're going to go with people who engage with your page for the exact reason that I just described. There are more specific options available. 365 is our maximum audience retention. And then we go with Facebook. I like to call these people Facebook page engagers 365. And then we can go ahead and click create audience. So you might need to create a few others depending on your business. We already discussed that, but for most people, that is going to be your custom audiences created. Might take Meta a little bit of time to populate these, but that's fine. So what we can now do is jump back into Ads Manager and we come back into our Omnipresent content campaign. I'm going to jump back to the ad set level, click edit, and we're going to scroll down to the targeting section. Here we go, and we're going to add in those custom audiences, okay? So what have we got here? We've got our website visitors that we want to add in, 180. We've got our example email list that we want to add in there. We created a video view custom audience too, so I want to make sure those are in there. You can see there's multiple versions because, like I said, this is an example ad account where I've demonstrated some of this stuff previously. What else do we have? We had Instagram, Engagers 365, and last but not least, we've got our Facebook page Engagers 365 added in there, okay? So we've got a number of different custom audiences. Don't worry about adding in more than that, less if you don't have, for example, an email list, or you only have a Facebook page, or only have an Instagram account, you don't have one of the others, you haven't got a video view. Like this will vary depending on your business, but as many as you can create that are relevant to your business, go ahead and get these added in. Now, once you get these added in, you might see this little pop-up here saying we're matching your audience to profiles on Meta Technologies, which can take up to 3 days. You can start running ads with this audience straight away. In my experience, it's not going to take 3 days, or at least the vast majority of the people in these custom audiences it won't be 3 days for Meta to have matched those. It might take a bit of extra time for some of the more difficult cases where Meta's sort of struggling and trying to work it out in the background of like, who exactly is this? It doesn't quite match, like the email just doesn't match up, but they might be able to find out in other ways. So basically you are fine once you've got this set up to run the campaign. Don't feel like you need to go ahead and wait 3 days. Now, because we've added in these custom audiences, and these are the people that have interacted with our business before, they're the people that we know are interested, we know are warm, we know are good potential prospects, we're happy for Meta to advertise to people like them. I think it's important to leave the rest of this stuff open, okay? So you can go with 18 plus, all genders, and don't add in anything in the detailed targeting sections like interest, behaviors, etc. Used to recommend before we had this suggestion system that if you didn't have much in the way of warm audiences, you would want to add in some detailed targeting to narrow it down. You just don't need to do that anymore. And even if you're basically a brand new business, just about every business I've ever interacted with has at least some warm audience. They put out one video on Facebook before and it got 120 views, and that's enough to sort of get going. Or as soon as you start running ads, you will have people in these warm audiences. So even if you're brand new, you've almost certainly got something here that you can go ahead and use. And you just don't need to worry about coming up with an alternative option, or at least once you start advertising, day one after you start advertising, you will be able to have these set up, right? So don't worry about thinking, oh, I'm brand new, I don't have these warm audiences, I can't use this strategy. Yeah, you can. You can go ahead and get these added in. Now, when you set up your targeting this way, Meta's going to start by advertising to the people in these warm audiences. If you have a bit of a larger budget for an omnipresent content campaign and relatively small warm audiences, then Meta's going to go outside that and put your ads in front of cold audiences. But for the most part, it'll be these people, particularly if you have reasonable sized warm audiences and your daily budget is relatively small. That's one of the reasons why we use smallish daily budgets with omnipresent content campaigns. And then with these warm audiences, most of these are going to update for you automatically, because obviously these are going to change, right? So website visitors, provided you've got the pixel installed, that'll always be the 180 days from now into the past. So the audience will look slightly different tomorrow because you've lost a day on 181 days ago at that point, but you'll have gained a new one from yesterday, and so on and so on. And the same will happen with the Facebook page engages, the video viewers, Instagram engages. That's all going to update automatically. You may need to manually update your email lists and customer lists, which I'd recommend doing regularly. If you've got a direct MailChimp integration, that becomes less necessary. And with the video viewers, if you've gone in and selected specific videos and there are new ones, well, then you're going to want to go ahead and add in the new ones, particularly if they get lots of views and you feel like they're relevant to what it is that you're looking to sell. So this kind of takes care of itself, with the exception needing to update this once you get going. And that is the targeting setup. Nothing else added in here. Then we get down to the placement section, right? Now the default here, you can see interesting threads feed placement included, which is a relatively recent addition. We've got the default here is Advantage Plus placements. Now, if we were running a conversion-based campaign, I'd be absolutely fine with you leaving that as Advantage Plus placements. What that means is basically Meta's going to put your ads in the locations to help you achieve, remember, if we scroll back up, this performance goal, maximize reach of ads. Now, if that performance goal is get as many conversions as possible or deliver the highest possible return on ad spend, great, go ahead and do it, you work it out, Meta. Because with an omnipresent content campaign, the objective is to maximize reach. If we don't direct the system here, Meta can put our ads on the less valuable placement options because that maximizes reach. Basically, put ads where it is cheaper to put ads so that they get put in front of more people, and that will help Meta achieve the performance goal, but it's not necessarily good for us and our business. We don't really want our ads to be put on the audience network and other less valuable placements. We want our ads put where people are more likely to notice them. That's the whole point of running this campaign. So I want to go ahead and instead of using Advantage Plus placements, which is basically everything, let Meta work it out, I'm going to go ahead and select manual placements. Again, this is something that Meta's not going to want you to do. They're going to try and dissuade you from doing it. I totally get why, because with other campaign types, this is good advice, but just not in this instance. And I'm going to want to be more specific, right? So you can see here, Messenger is already deselected, and I'm going to want to deselect the audience network. And once I do that, if I scroll down, we can see that at the bottom, apps and sites, expand your reach, that's all automatically deselected because I deselected the audience network. The rest of the stuff I'm pretty happy with. Like, I'm happy for ads to be on feeds and stories and reels and even in-stream and search results as the placement options. We have seen examples where omnipresent content campaigns have been set up incorrectly, and most of the ad impressions have gone on the audience network, which we typically find to be less valuable. And so that's just something you can quickly avoid by clicking on a few settings. And right at the bottom, you've also got this show more options section. I think it's good that that's tucked under a show more options because it's really for advanced advertising reasons, not stuff that I think most advertisers need to worry about. Things like, in this case, brand safety suitability, like where do you want your ads to appear and not appear? You can come in and be more specific in this, like content type exclusions, topic exclusions. I don't want my ads to appear in and around this stuff. It's not something I'd worry about for most advertisers, but just know it is an option if you want to plow into that. This can be particularly important. We've run into this with larger brands where they're really, they guard their brand and brand values very closely. And this is a good way to do it. Be like, we really don't want our ads to appear alongside such and such. We don't want that association. You can come in and you can have a lot of control over that as an advertiser, which is great, but just not something most advertisers need to worry about and not something I'm going to go through in this video. Something I probably will cover in another video for the businesses where that applies though. So that is our ad set up. Takes a little bit of time, particularly if you haven't already got those custom audiences created, but we've now set up what we need to set up, and I'll get to the ad in a minute. First, I want to build out the structure. So we've got this called new awareness ad set. And like I talked about before, we're going to have 14 ad sets. So you want to set everything up within that ad set first, all the settings, because we want our 14 ad sets to be identical. We want the same frequency cap, we want the same targeting, we want all the other settings to be the same. So I'm going to go ahead and click duplicate on this. We're going to duplicate into the original campaign, basically duplicate it alongside the existing one. We're going to create 13 different copies so that we end up with 14 different ads. Okay. Here's where the strategy starts to come together, and I'll explain why it works so well and all that sort of stuff. So we've got 14 different ad sets that are identical, but we are going to have a different ad in each ad set. And if you think about how that therefore is presented to your prospects. So we've got 14 different ad sets, each with a different ad. Each ad set has a frequency cap of 1 impression every 7 days. So if you're someone within this target audience, you're going to see one ad you're going to see the ad. Each ad set only has one ad. So you're going to see one ad from one ad set once a week. 14 ads means that on average, you're going to see 2 different ads per day across the week, 14 different ads across the week. Now, what does that allow you to do? That's what this whole structure and all what we've been creating is allow you to do. That allows you to show up to a prospect again and again and again, to build that relationship, to build trust, but to do so in a way that doesn't get really boring, isn't overkill. If you just had the one ad or even a couple of ads being put in front of people twice a day, every day, over an extended time period, they get really bored with them really quickly. That's why we have the 14 different ads, and that's why we need to separate them out into different ad sets so that we control the frequency of each ad. If we lumped all these ads into one ad set, the frequency control is set at the ad set level, then what Meta would do is they would prioritize the best performing ads, and those would get much more distribution as opposed to the others. That's not what we're after. We're not after broad ad impressions across a really large audience. What we're after is a relatively small number of people seeing ads again and again and again, different ads, so they don't get bored, where value is being delivered, and you build that relationship. If you think about all the experts, all the content creators, the business, educational content creators that you follow, people like myself, the only way you get to the point where you trust them, where you like what they do, where they make a recommendation and it carries weight, is by consuming lots of their content, by seeing their ads many times, by delivering value. It happens over time. If you almost think about the relationship between your business and your prospects being a relationship between two friends. Like when you first meet someone, they're a stranger. And you might get on with them initially, but in order to get to the point where you know, like, and trust them, it takes time. It takes multiple exposures. You meet up with them again, and you see them again, and you do this and that, and you have common interests, and you keep coming back. And like, you need to get those reps in order to get to that place. Exactly the same with your target market and your business. You need to deliver that over time. So how do we do that with the 14 different ad sets? There's different boxes that we want to tick and different types of ads that we want to make sure we put in front of people, okay? So there's 4 categories. The first one is value ads. And value ads are pretty straightforward. They are delivering value. They're giving your prospects a piece of information that they are going to find helpful. Something that's going to help them achieve what they want to achieve, help them avoid something they want to avoid, value. We all know what that looks like, right? So out of the 14 ads, we might have 4 value ads. In an ideal world, these would be video ads. It's the best place to build a relationship. It's the best place to demonstrate, to provide that value, to give quite a bit of information, potentially be a bit more nuanced. But you can do it with other ad formats as well. I've seen this done with image ad formats, particularly ones that contain significant information. So we've got 4 value ads in there. The next category is going to be what I call demonstration ads. Now, this is more important for some businesses than others. In fact, let me make sure I get this naming convention right so it's all easy to understand. So there are some products and services where people aren't really familiar with what it is, how it works, what the process is potentially to become a customer. So with our business, for example, we would fall into this category to some extent. Someone would be like, well, I'm interested in working with them, I'm interested in joining their mentorship program, but like, what's actually in it? I don't really know. I haven't maybe bought something like that before. I don't really know what's included. Our mentorship program is quite unique as well. So we would need to demonstrate what's included in it so they just understand. Some people might be interested in buying like a high-end product, but they're going, you know, how long does it take? How much input do you need from me? What's the process involved? All sorts of things with lots of services, lots of particularly bespoke products, anything high-end, anything not necessarily off the shelf, even things that are off the shelf, to be honest. You can sometimes do demonstration ads, like demonstrate how it's built if it's a product in your factory, demonstrate what the service looks like, demonstrate what the next steps are to becoming a customer. Well, we start by, they get in touch and then we come round to their property and we have a look at their such and such and we recommend a design for their new bespoke kitchen or whatever it is that you're selling, right? Lots of different examples I'm sort of coming up with. So we might have 4 demonstration-based ads in the mix as well. The next category is going to be testimonial ads, okay? So testimonial ad 1. Now, in an ideal world, basically all of these would be video ads or as many as possible. You can have image ads, particularly with testimonial. You can also have it demonstration a little bit more difficult. But just sort of giving you this would be the gold standard, would be video ads if you can get them, if you can make them. Testimonials are pretty straightforward. They're going to be success stories, proof that you can deliver on what you say you can deliver on. And in general, we are all more likely to buy a product or service if we can see that it's got great reviews, great testimonials, if there are case studies, if there's evidence that people like us have bought it in the past and been happy with a decision and got a good outcome. They've liked the product, they've liked the service, they'd recommend it. So for example, if you go ahead and click on that link I mentioned previously about our mentorship program and go check it out, you'll see there are testimonials and case studies and we've got that stuff all around our website because we're demonstrating that people have been through this and they've got good results, and that's something we want to emphasize because we know how important that is to people's decision-making processes when it comes to buying. We've got a 4.7 out of 5 rating on Trustpilot, really, really high for the marketing space. So we talk about that a lot. We demonstrate that. We include it where we can, and these are all credibility indicators. So it's testimonial, but it could be other things like reviews and those sorts of things. And the ideal in this scenario is normally going to be like a client video testimonial. They are very difficult to get, previous customer video testimonials, so you might not have them. You're probably easy to get written ones or something along those lines, but those would be your next group. And if you have a target audience with different types of people, different segments, try and get people that are representative of each of those segments. So if, for example, you sell a product where on the lower end it's like DIYers and on the high end it's like full professionals, you would want testimonials from full professionals that use some of your high end products, and you would also want ones from lower end like DIYers, because they would speak more to those relevant target groups that you are looking to reach. And then we've got the last 2 here, which I would call call to action. Okay. So this is very simply, what's the next step people need to take? So this might move on from where a demonstration demonstrates like the next steps, the next process, but a call to action is a bit more direct. So it might say something like, so if you're interested in our mentorship program, you go ahead and book a free call to find out more. Oh, and by the way, we only have limited slots available, which is true. I mean, we only have limited slots available every month for our mentorship program. So you can start to sort of add in that urgency and scarcity into your call to action ads. They're not necessarily as direct as you might have within a conversion campaign, which we will sometimes run alongside an omnipresent content campaign. I will talk about that later on. But yeah, that's kind of the structure. We'd have less of those than we would of the other 3 categories. It doesn't necessarily need to be 4-4. 4-2, you might have a few more value ads and 1 less demonstration, 1 less testimonial. Demonstration is just less important for certain types of businesses where people just get it intuitively or they're familiar with that product or service. With some, it's really, really important, particularly if you've developed something new or something people haven't engaged with before. But that's going to be our structure, right? So each one of those ad sets has a different ad like this. These are the different categories. And that allows us to put, value ads in front of people, and then a demonstration, and then a testimonial, and CTAs, and it all mixed in. It's all fresh because it's all different. And over time, you can build that relationship without annoying people because they're just seeing the same ad over and over again. So I just mentioned that the beauty of this omnipresent content strategy is the ability to put different ads in front of people again and again and build a relationship with them over time. That might not sound like a big deal, but I really don't want you to underestimate its impact because it absolutely is. You can completely change the lead generation capacity of a business, the demand for their products, what they're able to charge, their conversion rate. Everything changes. If you are seen as one of the go-to people in, if you basically become famous to your target audience within the industry because they see you so often, all of those touch points become so much easier. Conversion becomes so much easier when you talk to a prospect. You get way more leads in the first place. You can charge a lot more. People are happier once they start working with you because you've already demonstrated the process. They know what to expect. It can tick so many different boxes. So don't think that it's not a big deal. It absolutely is. Okay, some really other important points I need to make about omnipresent content. But first, I want to let you know about Hyros. Hyros is the best tracking and attribution software for meta ads. It's the software all the big players in this industry use, including myself. I use it to track results for my own ads, as well as all my organic results as well. So if someone books a call for our done for you services, for example, I can see exactly where that person came from with a lot of accuracy. That allows me to make better decisions for my marketing and my business. Hyros has been able to track that from our ad spend in this campaign, we've generated £96,000, but £58,000 of that was not reported by Meta. So if I was just looking at my data within my Meta ad account, I might come to the conclusion that this campaign is doing okay, but in reality, this campaign is doing a lot better. Now, this is a relatively extreme example because of the nature of our business. So most of our products, services have recurring billing elements. Meta might be able to see what we make initially from our ad spend on that initial transaction, but not those subsequent payments. And that's why it shows the importance here of being able to accurately see what did we actually get from our ad spend in order to be able to make better decisions and optimize correctly. So if you want to improve the performance of your ad campaigns without having to touch your ads, go ahead and sign up to Hyros. There is a link in the video description. Okay, so we talked about the omnipresent content strategy being really great, being perfect for certain types of business. So we need to touch on that more and explain in a little bit more detail. So the businesses that see the best results from omnipresent content. There are other types of business, but the businesses that see the best results are ones where customers are worth at least $1,000 to your business once they do become customers. Not necessarily all in one go in that initial transaction, but over time. Why? With omnipresent content, what you are doing is you're putting ads in front of people, the same people, again and again and again. Now, each one of those ad impressions needs to be paid for. Therefore, you need to recoup that, obviously, and then some. You want this to be nicely profitable when someone does become a customer. And that's just much easier to do if customers pay you more and they're worth more money to your business. Also, this structure is required, it's more likely to be required if you are selling something that's more expensive. You don't need all those ad impressions and all those touch points if you're selling a $20 e-commerce product. That's basically an impulse purchase. People can see one ad, they can decide whether or not they want to go ahead and purchase it. So there's not the need for this structure with a lot of businesses. Those that struggle with the standard way of doing things, that's what we talked about right at the beginning of the video, that need to find a different strategy, this is often a much better alternative. But what comes with that is a higher value, because people do need more convincing if they're going to spend $5,000 with a company as opposed to $20. And the more you spend, the more convincing they need, whether it's a B2B transaction or a B2C. So what that usually means in terms of businesses that see the best results is going to be sort of bespoke products or things that are high end, not impulse purchases like I talked about. Most service-based businesses that aren't on the lower end, so something like a car wash, just the average customer value is not really there, and you don't need that much convincing that someone's a real expert to go to their car wash, right? You just need to be convinced that they do a decent job, take a look at reviews, job done, right? But any sort of most professional service, anything expertise-based, all coaches, consultants, agencies, professional service businesses, your prospects need to know that you know what you're talking about, that you've done it for people just like them in the past, how the process works, why they should work with you instead of the thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even more other options that they could work with. That's obviously a lot of business. Anytime you are selling expertise, even if you're not selling them as a service, you're selling them as like information, as courses, as programs, you need to develop that expertise. It's why me and my team put so much effort into our ads, because we run omnipresent content. If you've seen my content for a while, you've probably seen my ads on Meta popping up all the time. We're running omnipresent content ads. Or my organic content. We put so much time and effort into that to achieve that exact outcome. And we generate tons of leads, way more demand, like hundreds of times more demand than before I had a personal brand. Maybe thousands of times more demand for our services, for our done for you services, mentorship program, whatever it happens to be, because we've been running omnipresent content in combination with organic content. And if you can run it with organic content, great. Not all businesses can. That's a whole extra element of resources dedicated. It's not something I typically teach on, but if you can, then it can go that much further. So if you need to demonstrate expertise, this can be really valuable. Omnipresent content is also really valuable if your prospects need to be at the right time. They need to show up in the right way in order for them to be interested in your services. So let's say, for example, you are a tax specialist and you help people save on their taxes. Yes, people are always going to be interested in that service, but people within your target audience are probably more likely to be interested if their business has just grown or they've just had a pay rise and all of a sudden they're paying more tax. Now, you want to make sure that you are around and in front of those people at the right time for them. It's not good enough to just be like, well, my ad was really good, I don't know why they become a lead. It's because they just weren't ready. It just wasn't right for them at that time. We have this with as a marketing agency. That's why we need to be omnipresent and around all the time and deliver value and be there, is because when a business is first getting started, they may not be ready to work with us yet. But once they've had a little bit of a go with meta ads, they've seen it can work for them, but they want better results, maybe that's then the perfect time. Some people, that might take them 3 weeks from when they first started. Other people, it might take them 3 years. Completely depends on their business, their scale, their budget, how quickly things go. So we just need to make sure that we are there for when they're ready. Because what you don't want is to run a really good ad campaign once, but people who see it aren't ready, the vast majority aren't ready. When they are ready, they haven't seen you in a while, they've forgotten about you, they just go ahead with the first person that pops up instead. That happens in all sorts of markets all the time. Whereas if you can make sure that you are there, the clue is in the name, omnipresent. You want to be around all the time, be visible all the time, and you want to do so with content so people don't get bored, they don't get annoyed, they feel like they're getting value, then that is really valuable for those businesses, which a lot of the business I just described, anyone selling something more than $1,000, expertise-based service providers, absolutely applies to them as well. One thing to really note about the omnipresent content strategy, though, is that it takes time. Talked about previously about imagine a new friendship. How long does it take you to really trust that person? Usually quite a while. Sometimes there are things that can really expedite that. I know that, for example, if people come and consume loads of my content in a very short time period, we can expedite that process, but most people don't do that. They sort of bits here and there. They see ads from an omnipresent content strategy here and there. That's what builds a relationship, just like with friendships. And I often get questions from people saying, how long will it take until omnipresent content works? And it's not a binary. It's not, it didn't work until it did work. It didn't work and then 2 months later it did work. It slowly improves and it helps with performance the longer you do it. Just like with a friendship. You are better friends with someone if you've been friends for 6 months over a month. But the same is also true for when you've been friends for 2 years. You're better friends with them at 2 years and 6 months. And the same is also true at 5 years versus 2 years, and at 10 years versus 5 years, and at 20 years versus, and your best friends are often people you went to school with or went to university with forever ago, and you've been friends ever since. And as long as something, so this is a good point, as long as something doesn't get in the way to ruin the friendship. So you have to be careful with the content that you're creating and the ads that you're creating as part of your omnipresent content strategy. You want to show up in a good way. You want to deliver value. You want to provide helpful information like the testimonials and demonstration, not just be selling all the time, because you don't want to sour that relationship. So don't look at this as a when will it work. Think about this as a the longer I do this for, the better it will get. So I often get asked by people, how do you measure the results from an omnipresent content campaign? Because it is very difficult to do at the beginning, much more difficult than with a sales campaign or a leads campaign where you can look at your ROAS or your cost per conversion. With omnipresent content, it doesn't really work like that, and it does take a lot longer. So particularly measuring those results at the beginning is very, very difficult. So I think that some of it, you just have to trust the process. It'd be like me saying after you've, started a new friendship with someone a month in, you'd be like, how are you measuring this friendship? How are you going? It's like, we kind of seem to get on well, and really hard to do, right? So I think you have to use your judgment. There's not as many concrete metrics. What are the comments like on the ads that you're putting in front of people? Are they positive? Are they negative? Positive is obviously much better than negative. That's not a concrete thing to, I suppose you could come up with a system where you measure the positivity percentage and then calculate it. It all becomes far too complicated, but it's a sense of a feel that you get. Over time, you want to look out for things like, when people work with you, are they saying things like, oh, I was seeing you pop up everywhere? That's definitely something you want to watch out for. We have that all the time, by the way. All the time. My sales guys have that all the time, where they're constantly being told, oh yeah, we see Ben pop up all the time and on Instagram and such, that's definitely something you want. That shows it's being effective. Often we will run a sales-based or a leads-based campaign alongside our omnipresent content campaign. Why are we doing that? Firstly, we want to leverage the warmth and the relationship we're building as part of our omnipresent content campaign to get those conversions. Secondly, Not that many businesses can just kind of go, I'm going to run ads and not worry about getting anything from it for an extended period of time, even if it's like 3-6 months, right? You need to get something in the short run because you've got to pay the bills and get customers and all that sort of stuff. And your more direct campaigns are more likely to do that. So when we are running more direct campaigns alongside an omnipresent content campaign, we will typically see the results get better from the direct conversion-based campaign as long as your omnipresent content campaign is doing well. I've used this example before, but I think it's really telling. If someone you'd never heard of said, business coaching service, $50,000, 10 people only, click here. If you don't know who's offering that, no one's clicking on that. If Alex Hormozy runs that promotion, it probably sells out in minutes. That's because of the relationship he has built with his audience over many years. That's the power of this. That's the impact of this. And you would see that in his direct conversion campaign for that versus the other person where that offer just wouldn't work at all. You would, and as you're running your omnipresent content, you would see that improve over time. You're also going to see things like increased follower counts and engagement potentially across your organic content. So there's lots of sort of secondary benefits from this sort of structure, but that's what you're looking for. It just is not as concrete as what you are used to with other campaign types. And I think one of the things that you therefore need to factor into that is your own common sense and judgment around the quality of the ads being produced. Don't think that because you can't really accurately measure exactly what you're getting for it, that you can kind of create ads that are okay. You still want them to be really good. You want to, from your own sense as a marketer, being like, I'm proud of this. I'm really happy to put this out to the world. I think this is good stuff. I think this delivers value. I think this really demonstrates what we do. This is a fantastic testimonial from a customer. I'm really glad we're able to share that with people. This is encouraging people to take the next step. I think for people in this circumstance, it would be perfect for them, depending on the different ad types, okay? Another thing to note about omnipresent content. Meta will try and dissuade you from this structure. It is not typical. It is certainly not the best option for a lot of businesses that are selling particularly relatively inexpensive e-commerce products or even low value services, advertising something for just the sake of mass awareness. Let's say you're Coca-Cola running enormous awareness campaigns. Like, this is not the structure you'd want to run. But we're doing something different for different businesses. And I said right at the beginning that we developed this strategy because we've run Meta ad campaigns, spent more than $200 million. We've worked with every different type of business. And a lot of the information you see there out online comes from someone who may have had a lot of success with Meta ads, but they've typically had it with one business type, their own business. And they don't have the nuance that that's not going to work in all scenarios. So we develop omnipresent content because it works for us as well as clients that meet the same criteria. We probably could now because I have the personal brand, but we couldn't at the beginning run direct to offer campaigns for our marketing agency when no one knew who we were and we didn't have testimonials and all that sort of stuff. We had to come up with something different that was more value-based and allowed us to build that relationship over time. Like, now that would be different. And that's also something you can do with omnipresent content, by the way. You can build an audience, build a brand, either personally or to a company, that means that your future advertising efforts become a lot easier. We've kind of covered that with conversion campaigns getting better. So Meta will try and dissuade us from doing this. Most Meta advertising money is not spent on businesses that need this. It's spent by either small or particularly large companies that are selling more mass consumer goods, really big awareness campaigns and things like that. So that's why the advice is tailored for the majority, which makes sense. But just be aware that when you see all these warnings pop up, you can ignore them. They don't apply to you. That's absolutely fine. And particularly, we'd like to see more of these with the Andromeda update, and you'll have other content creators saying, don't run this type of campaign with Andromeda because Meta wants consolidated campaigns. They want lots of ad creative within the one ad set, and that is absolutely true. If you are using the direct to offer strategy, you are directly advertising products or services. That is not what we're doing here, because these types of businesses that can use this won't really work for you unless you have something else that's a massive competitive advantage, like a big personal brand or a unique something that no one else does, and you can clearly demonstrate that. It's very unlikely to work for you. You need something different. And when you're doing something different, you're going to have all the warnings and all the issues and all that sort of stuff, okay? So another thing I mentioned earlier that I want to properly explain now is ad sequencing and how that fits into omnipresent content campaigns, because another potential really big new development when it comes to omnipresent content campaigns and how they can operate and how we can get the most out of them as advertisers. Now, when I've talked about omnipresent content strategy before, one of the issues that people have had, one of the questions that comes up often is, how do I make sure that people see ads in the order that I want them to see them in terms of, I'd quite like them to see the value ads first, and then probably the demonstration ads, and then probably the testimonial ads, and then the call to action ads. I don't want the opposite order or some sort of mix to happen. How do I go about doing that? And previously, I never really had a good answer for those people. The best option that we had was to stagger the turning on of those ad sets. One of the advantages of having separate ad sets, so you could turn your value ads on first and then wait a day or so and then turn on others and on and on. Obviously, once you've been through that sort of first cycle, it's all kind of going to be a mixture and mixed in, and they're going to see an ad from here and an ad from there and that sort of thing. And some advertisers didn't like that. Well, Meta has very recently rolled out an ad sequencing feature to the auction buying type campaign, so the type of campaigns that we're using. They've had it available as part of the reservation buying type for a while, but we didn't feel that it was worth running omnipresent content campaigns using the reservation buying type in order to be able to use the ad sequencing feature, and because of the downsides that are associated with the reservation buying type. We talked about that early on. An easy way for a lot of particularly small and medium-sized advertisers to spend a lot of money and not really see much for it. Much more of a viable option for advertisers looking to spend really big budgets. But now that we do have this ad sequencing feature, or at least some ad accounts have this ad sequencing feature as of the recording of this video, it's likely to be rolled out more broadly shortly, that kind of changes that. So I wanted to quickly touch on that and demonstrate what you would need to do in order to use this. So if we go back into Ads Manager and our omnipresent content campaign, jump to the ad set level, just going to go ahead and click edit on one of these ad sets. And if we scroll down to the budget section, so in order to use the ad sequencing feature, the first thing you need to do is change from a daily budget to a lifetime budget. That's not ideal. I prefer daily budgets. I think you have more control. It's easier to keep running the campaign or the ad set for longer if it's performing well and you like it. Lifetime budgets is just a little bit more restricted once it's up and running in what you can do. Also be aware that if you do change from daily budget to lifetime budget, that the total amount spent is often going to be more than what you had intended to spend. So you might want to, we've gone from a £5 per day daily budget to a £350 total lifetime budget. It's over in an extended period of time, 30 days, but just watch out for that, because that can catch advertisers out. Now, once you switch to lifetime budgets, if you have the ad sequencing feature, it'll pop up here. We've got ad set scheduling. That is not the same thing. That's allowing you to set a schedule so that ads only run certain times of the day or certain days of the week, and that's not what we're talking about here. So this example ad account doesn't have this ad sequencing feature, but I can show you what it looks like because, like I said, it has been a part of the reservation buying type for quite a while. So if I just jump out to the campaign level and create a new campaign and use the reservation buying type, let's go ahead and select awareness. And then I'm just going to jump to the ad set level and scroll down to this part here, ad sequencing, right? So if you do have this feature in your ad account as part of the auction buying type, you will see this ad sequencing option. You can see it says deliver your ads in a specific order to create a compelling storytelling experience for your audience. Unfortunately, I can't click on without actually setting ads live as part of the reservation buying type, but you can use this, and that will allow you to do what I said, where you have certain ads being delivered initially, then other ones after, and you can choose those. Now, in order to use this ad sequencing feature as part of a new version, an updated omnipresent content campaign, you're going to need to change the structure. So instead of having all those different ads in different ad sets, you can now have those ads grouped into an ad set, because you're going to determine the order that those are seen in. And there are obvious advantages to that, like I talked about. You might want to start with value, you might want to then move on to more of a demonstration setup, and then more of a testimonial setup, and then finally a call to action. But the reason why I have still demonstrated the omnipresent content campaign in the more traditional structure with the 14 different ad sets, one different ad in each ad set, as opposed to demonstrating it this way, is firstly because not all ad accounts, or not most ad accounts, have this ad sequencing feature as part of the auction buying type yet, so they can't use it, just like I wouldn't be able to in this example ad account. But also, I don't think that sequence for most advertisers is the way to go. I'm actually quite happy for ads to be delivered in a somewhat random order and for it to be mixed up amongst those 14 to different users. Because if you think about the user experience, if you put them through that sequence, well, okay, how long is that going to last? A week. then do you put them back through the exact same sequence, or do you create a whole new batch of ads? I think that's very unrealistic to create 14 new ads every week. Like, almost no advertisers have the resource capacity to be able to do that. So you're not going to create a whole batch of new ads. Otherwise, you're just then putting them back through the sequence again. So you probably need to create a new campaign with a new lifetime budget in order to run that sequence again and again every week. And I actually think it might become a bit predictable. That, okay, we see this ad on a Monday and this ad on a Tuesday, and et cetera, et cetera. I don't think that's good. I think it's better to have it be somewhat random and it be an ad here and an ad there. And yes, some people are going to see 4 ads on a day instead of 2, and some people are going to see none. That's obviously going to be based on their activity, right? We can't show ads to people unless they're actually on Facebook, Instagram, etc. Although most users of those apps, if they do use them, they use them every day or nearly every day. So I'm quite happy to have the somewhat older version of Omnipresent Content Campaign without ad sequencing be the way we still do things and the way we go forward with it, at least for the time being. Because, like I said, I think the advantages of doing that outweigh being able to put in a specific sequence. What I would recommend typically is just stagger that initial turning on of those ad sets. So turn on the value ones first, leave the call to actions ones till a bit later. I don't think that's a big deal. This is a long-term strategy. What you do in those first 3 or 4 days is not going to have a huge amount of impact, because we're going to run these campaigns for months, hopefully even years, to really compound and build that relationship with the audience and get to the point where they're wanting to work with us and pay higher prices and they convert better, and we've got massive lead flow or massive demand for our products and all the things that we're looking to do from our marketing. That compounds over time. So don't worry too much about that initial sequence. If this is really important to your business, then you can go ahead and do that. I want to discuss it because it does have big implications for omnipresent content in particular, this ad sequencing feature being rolled out to the auction buying type. So keep an eye on your ad account if you do have it. But yeah, just something to mention. Another question I often get from people running omnipresent content campaigns is how often should they refresh ad creative? I mean, just talked about with ad sequencing, you can't do it every week. That's completely unrealistic. And that's actually one of the advantages of the omnipresent content strategy, is because you've got 14 different ads in this case. And there is some flexibility there, by the way. If you can only produce 10, then go ahead and run with 10 ad sets, 10 different ads. Just change that frequency cap to 1 impression every 5 days, as opposed to 1 impression every 7 days. So you still have that 2 ads per day effect, and then being different over, in that case, 5 days, as opposed to a week. But you still have the same effect going on. So there is some flexibility there. But the reason why we're creating quite a lot of ads with quite a lot of different different creatives, it's going to stay fresh longer. People are going to take longer to fatigue, to get bored of your ads. So a typical recommendation is going to be something like every 3 to 6 months, you want to do a full refresh on, in this case, 14 different ads, recreate new ones. And you can learn from the previous batch. What do people particularly enjoy? What do they engage with more than others? Where are the comments really positive? Make more stuff like that, and potentially less stuff that gets less of a reaction. And that 3 to 6 months also wants to be somewhat dynamic, okay? So take a look at your comments. Are people getting bored? Are people saying, oh, seeing this all the time, it's getting annoying? Also think about your audience dynamic. So some audiences refresh really quickly. So a classic example would be wedding photographers, right? If you are looking to sell your services as a wedding photographer, well, the people who are interested in your services now will be completely different people in 6 months' time, because people get engaged, they're looking to book their wedding. That is a very fixed period within their lives. The same might be true of like newborn clothing, right? People buy that for a fixed period for their newborn baby in their lives. And that's basically it. They're not going to be interested in other times. So that audience refreshes, and that means you don't have to refresh your ad creative as much, because people are just simply not in there long enough to get, to become bored of it. They sort of cycle through and they'll be exited out of your audiences, and new people will be focused on. Other audiences are much more static, and therefore it is more important to produce new ad creative, refresh the ads, and make sure that people don't get bored. Because if people get bored and they just learn to ignore and swipe past, well, you're not going to get the message across, you're not going to deliver the value, you're not going to show them that you can do great work, and they're certainly not going to listen to your call to actions, which is the whole point of advertising in the first place. So typically every 3 to 6 months, but obviously adjust that depending on your business. And I just want to be very clear, having talked about the omnipresent content strategy and demonstrated it in detail for however long this video is, hopefully you now have a really good understanding and feel like you can implement it and use it to help your business. But I want to be very clear that not every business should use the omnipresent content strategy. We've talked about the criteria that you need to meet, and I would say that actually probably more than half of all businesses don't meet that criteria. They don't sell something that has a high enough customer value to justify it. They also don't sell something that necessarily requires that expertise and that to be sort of demonstrated, and that relationship to be built between the business and the prospects. But a lot of advertisers do, and they will really benefit from this. And the advertisers that struggle with the traditional way of doing things when it comes to running Facebook ads, with that more direct to offer strategy, just doesn't really work for them. This is perfect for them. And I know that there'll be people who watch this video and they'll say that the structure I've described and a lot of the advice I've given here contradicts what I've said in other videos. And what they're lacking is the nuance of this is a totally different strategy for a different type of business from other strategies that are for other types of businesses. So don't think there's just one way of doing Facebook and Instagram advertising. Absolutely not true. We're talking about a different way of doing things to achieve a different objective, because there are different hurdles to overcome for certain businesses in comparison to a lot of my other content, which might be more geared towards the direct to offer style campaigns and things like that. And actually it'd be interesting, those of you who have made it this far through the video, have a look at the comments, and even though I've said this, you will still see those sorts of comments from people that haven't made it this far in a video that have commented, and we can sort of have a little chuckle together that they obviously haven't watched the whole thing and they haven't paid close enough attention to know that it's horses for courses, right? It's do it this way for this type of business and this way for this type of business. And that's just a general piece of advice within the Facebook ad space, or with any sort of business related advice, is the advice being given right for your business? Because it might be fantastic advice, but if it won't work for you, you can end up with a lot of issues. We see that all the time, where a client will work with us or someone join a mentorship program and they say, oh, I followed the strategy from such and such person I follow. And you're like, right, they only work with this type of business, or they only run ads for their own business. They don't have an agency with 1,000+ clients at any one time like we do. And they haven't spent the money, they haven't got the breadth of experience. So that might be great advice for that type of business, but that will not work for you at all. So just be really clear on, does my business meet the criteria that we talked about earlier? Yes, it does. Brilliant. Let's go ahead and use omnipresent content. If it doesn't, then other strategies that I talk about may well perform better for you. And you can always test this stuff and see how things go. Whenever I talk about omnipresent content campaigns as well, there are still lots of questions. I've tried to get ahead of those and be as helpful as I can here. But if you do have questions about this strategy and there are things I didn't cover that you think, oh, I wonder what should I do with this or what should I do with that, let me know in the comments. I see all the comments and I'll respond to as many as I can. And I'll see you on another video very soon.